Mel, good to see you. It's been too long, and we could start talking about my conversation with Neil Howe and the fourth turning. Let's start with that. Let's dive into that. The idea of the fourth turning and your thoughts on it, and what you think.
So I don't know if this is going to seem like on purpose, but I do have a little bit of different views from a lot of conventional wisdom. And I think on that whole thing with Neil Holland for turning, I honestly think that the whole generation thing is discombobulated. I think it's generally based on, okay, there was this baby boom generation and this happened and whatever. And I think in what's happened is we've become more globalized, and you just can't look at the generations in the United States or Western Europe and think those match up with generations in China or Africa or South America. And so I honestly think this whole generational thing is a very kind of American look on things, where we're like Gen Z, Gen Al. I think it's much more diffused. And I think some of his points in the fourth turning are great points. I think they explain things in some sense. But I think you also should acknowledge, if you're being honest and looking at global demographics, that we just don't live in this very neat generational world anymore. And that what he might be pointing to me, is actually better explained by a work by Peter Titchen, which is called End Times, which talks about kind of overpopulation of elites, and it's on more of like a 80-year type cycle, and I think it makes a lot more sense, and I think it describes a lot better the global world. I think looking at it as generation to generation in the United States based on baby boom generations, I think that's a little passé. But that's not to say that we're not in a moment of extreme change. So I would completely agree that we are in a moment of, like, a new economic order is coming forth. We're going through a major, like, 80-year interest rate cycle. We're going through a lot of, like, major changes, which make all the premises of the fourth turning kind of make sense. But I don't necessarily see it as kind of cut and dry of these four generations that he prints out.
Yeah, and the idea of the seasons, right? And now we're coming
Mm.
into a new, you know, summer seasons. Like it all is the same. Like here, my thing with this is, and him and I got into it a little bit, but I didn't say it exactly like this. When the glass breaks, you don't know where the
Mm.
pieces are going to land.
Mm. Yeah.
There's no guarantee this piece is going to land here, this is going to land here, and no one knows where it's all going to go.
And where are the lines, Mike? Because I remember the first time I heard about this was over 20 years ago, and it was talked about like we're in the fourth. Like, where is this hard line? Like, that's my point. Is that okay? It's a good framework. It's a good way to think about things. But the truth of the matter is that for over 20 years, he's been talking about this. The first time I heard about him was on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie, literally in like probably 2003 or 2004. And he's been talking about like this transformation, and I think he's right. There's a transformation going on. I just don't know why you have to categorize it into four generations. That just doesn't need. I don't think you need to do that in order to explain what is going on today. And I think that if you look with clear eyes at what is going on today, I don't think that's necessarily a beneficial framework to look at it through. I think it's better to look at it through a global rotational framework, where we had a British Empire, we had an American Empire, we had the post-Bretton Woods system, 1944, that is now coming to an end, where this whole U.S. dollar reserve currency status is ending. And I think that these are things that are bigger themes that are going on, and trying to look at it like there's four distinct generations. I mean, maybe that adds value, but to me, it just clouds the picture.
Well, and do you also think it represents that generation mindset to where versus you and I are close in age, I think, right? You're Gen X.
Yeah, I just turned 50 last year.
Oh, happy belated. I'll be 48 in May. Yeah, so we're in the same group. And
Hmm.
I think the mindset is different between our generation and, you know, well, I know it's different between our generation and the boomers, and then the Gen Z below, or I always get it all screwed up. The millennials are below us, and then the Gen Z is below that. So, you know, the idea of it's going to go the way it's going to go the way our parent, the way it did for our parents. It's not the reality. The system has changed. The game has changed.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I think what's happened is the game has reverted, that we're going back to normal, that there was this very brief spike of America running the whole world, and it happened post World War II. And if you look at global GDP, the United States after World War II was over 50% of GDP. The United States is now about 4% of the world's population. We're less than 20% of global GDP. We are essentially an island, and yet we still want to think of ourselves as commanding the world.
When you
And I
say we,
don't think
Mel,
that,
let me interrupt you. When you say we, you mean the United States government?
yes, I
Okay.
mean the United States government, and even
Because
to
I'm
some
in the
extent,
habit,
I mean
not
the,
to interrupt you. This is the last time I interrupted, but I always say they now out of habit because, you know, with the government's doing anything, I have no involvement in the decision making, so that's why it threw me off for a second when you said we.
well,
Sorry.
when I say we, I also kind of mean the United States population at large,
Oh.
because I do think that most people still see it that way. And they still see America as, I think, they're still viewing us, so most people in the United States have a very unrealistic viewpoint of what America power is and what American military might can do, and what, like, if you listen to Donald Trump at Davos or you listen to these people, like, you'd think that we were in 1945 when we were the only ones with nuclear weapons. We were 50% of GDP. And the truth is, we're just not. And this is not to say that what Trump is doing or how he's handling things is necessarily incorrect, although I do think he's misguided on a number of issues, especially Israel. But I do think that what's happening is the United States is needing to adjust more back to actually the situation that has been most common for most of our history, which is we're in a very important country, we're a very powerful country, but we don't control the world. And I think there was a brief period, to be frank, where we pretty much just controlled the world. We just did. We were the only ones with nuclear weapons. We were 50% of world GDP. Japan was destroyed. Europe was destroyed. The emerging markets were completely undeveloped. China was completely undeveloped. And that the United States essentially controlled the world. Then the Soviet Union fell. We had this, as John Mearsheimer calls it, the unipolar moment. And we tried to extend that to the rest of the world. That failed. And now we're like, okay, we're back to like a multipolar moment where the United States is a very important country, but we're not able to just go out there and do whatever we want to do, even though we want to still think that we can. And I think that that's kind of the situation that we're in, and we're still in a very fortunate situation. And if you look back, you mentioned the previous generations. I think that these previous generations are essentially like living in a fantasy world when people look back and they're like, oh, the 1950s were so great, or like, that's not the way the United States was. The United States in the 1950s was an extremely segregated society where if you were black, if you were Hispanic, if you were any of these people, you were essentially cut out. And so if you look at the pyramid, like, yes, if you were a native born heterosexual white male like I am, then you were like living at this huge level. But in the 1950s, if you were a black man, like you were pretty down. And so I think there's a lot of people talking about the K-shaped economy and affordability, and they're saying things like, "Oh, the United States has gone downhill." I think that's bullshit. I think that actually the average American's standard of living is up. It's an upward trajectory. I think if you compare yourself to a 1950s white heterosexual male native-born man, then our standard of living has gone down. But if you compare yourself to the average American in 1950 or 1955, your standard of living has probably gone up. And so what people don't realize, especially some of these white liberal people like Renee Good or any of these people, as they protest to open up the world, to let people in, they don't understand that that's also going to bring down the standard of living for the average American. And so you have to look at it not as white privilege, in my view, but American privilege. And we had an American privilege moment. And there's a lot of people that have said, let's destroy that American privilege. Let's get rid of it because we want to be racially equal and we want to do all these things. But you should be aware that once you do that, you're going to bring down the average. And so if you let minorities, if you let immigrants into the structure, then by definition, you're going to bring down the average for the white person. And so the average white person should not be surprised when they see their standard of living go down as we let everybody else into the picture.
Do you think, though, with that, the standard of living, the 50s compared to now, people use so much financing, though, and they do so much leverage today in order to have that lifestyle. And also, I mean, I go back to our grandparents, where you had one person working, and people had big families, and you could afford to have one parent stay home. There was plenty of food, same old kind of boring stuff, mashed potatoes.
Could you do that if you were Hispanic or black or a single mother?
But there wasn't. But how many? What was the percentage of people that were?
It was about 20%, 25%. So and that has grown substantially. So what's happened is we had a very privileged class, and this privileged class enjoyed extreme wealth overall. Then what we did was we said we're going to break down the barriers to this privileged class, and we're going to let everybody in. I'm not saying that was the wrong thing to do. I actually believe it was the right thing to do from a moral perspective. But I think you're being naive if you think that you can just open up the whole world and say Indians can come in on H-1B visas. Minorities can now have the top jobs. Women can now go into these. If you then think that white men are going to continue to have that position of privilege, I think you're naive. I think what's happened is completely, expected, which is the standard of living for white heterosexual male native-born men in the United States has gone down as we have opened up the floodgates to let everybody else in. And I think this is part of the Donald Trump MAGA immigration philosophy, is that people are starting to understand this, that if you just let the borders open, and then you not only let the borders open, but you say, okay, everybody gets to have the same rights, everybody gets to have health care, everybody's kids get to free education, you're going to bring down the level for the privileged class, which I'm a part of, I think you're a part of. And what I'm saying is I'm unapologetic that I want to keep my privileged class. Right. I don't want this to happen, right? I don't want to try to support the world. I want to keep my American privilege. I want to defend it. I want to fight for it. I want it to continue. And I'm not going to apologize for that to anybody.
Yeah, I think where I was referencing and I'm going off my own personal family experience. My grandfather worked at the Ford plant in Northeast Ohio. My other grandfather owned a grocery store. So I mean, blue collar, right? Factory workers. So that's where I reference.
I come from that type of stuff too, Mike. And I mean, I'm sure that we probably built this thing. And then it's like, I have family members that go back to the 1600s. In this country. And I have other family members that are Polish immigrants and everybody else. And I think people need to understand, like, this country was built on racism, segregation, imperialism. I I mean, that's how we got to where we are. I mean, like, you can go back to uh, the Spanish-American War in 1898, where we took over Philippines, we took over Puerto Rico. We would have taken over Cuba, but in the declaration of war in 1898, I believe it was, Congress said that the United States could not take over Cuba, and that's why we let Cuba be independent. It wasn't because we really wanted it to be. And then what we did was there was a whole number of Supreme Court cases. They were called the Insular Supreme Court cases in the 1900s. And they were all about, are people born in the territories United States citizens by birth? And the way the Supreme Court read it was, no, they are not. That the United States is the United States, the United Contiguous States, and that therefore these people, even though the 14th Amendment, the Birthright Citizenship Amendment, had already been passed post-Civil War, that people born in Guam or Puerto Rico or the Philippines were not United States citizens. And the only reason why some of those people have citizens, and some of them don't, by the way, a lot of people have no idea about any of this. Puerto Ricans have citizenship because of a statutory act. American Samoans are not born citizens, even though it's United States territory. So there's a long history of determining who was born in the United States that gets to be a citizen, and all this stuff that Trump is doing, in my mind, is like so in line with 90% of American history, but it's not in line with the last 10 or 15% of American history. So if you look at Teddy Roosevelt, you know, he was Secretary of the Navy ahead of the Spanish-American War. He's like, you know what America needs? America needs a war. I welcome a war. We need a war. Like, let's go. Let's create an empire. Like, this is the American ethos. It's empire building. It's domination. It's war. This is what it is. And a lot of people, they're looking back on it and they're like, oh, well, America was built on like some multiracial immigration ethos. No, America was built on a European-centric imperialistic ethos. And that's what Trump is bringing in. And now a lot of people are saying, well, we don't want that because we want to be moral and we want to do this. And I would just caution those people that morality might really constrict your standard of living. And be careful before you get what you wish for, because if you want an equal, egalitarian, democratic world, just be careful, because there's not enough resources for Americans to live the way Americans live right now in an equal democratic world.
You saying that, I think of Venezuela, because I had put out a post on X. I don't have it up in front of me exactly what I wrote, but it was something like, how about we concentrate on fixing the healthcare system in this country, the oppressed tax system we have here, and something else I said. I put it on my personal Facebook, Mel. I got so much shit for that. Like, people call me a liberal, and they're like, all you do is complain. I said, no, I'm not. Like, I'm just, why aren't we looking from within rather than, Venezuela? Now, I've had some time to reflect on it, and to what you just said, this is the way it is now, and this is the way it was before. And you just summarize, that's the way it was before. So people are bitching. Go ahead.
So I was thinking, I think it's important to look back at, like, say, 200 or 300 years ago and say, what were like the smartest minds, the smartest economists thinking? And Malthusian was one of the smartest. He believed that, like, you just could not produce enough food to support the population growth that was coming. And so he saw a dire future. And at the end of the day, he was absolutely wrong, because he didn't understand the changes that technology brought. So I want to actually bring some optimism into this view, which is that AI, and I think this is a huge story, and I think it's a geopolitical story. AI, humanoids, all of these things eventually are going to be able to help most of the world's population really rise up, and and rise up in their standard of living. I think if you look at the standard of living that we have right now, it's very constrained. because there are labor constraints, there are commodity constraints. And this is why, if you look at the stock market, if you look at gold, if you look at silver, if you look at copper, um, we're seeing commodities just go crazy. The best stocks are not Google or Amazon anymore. It's Freeport McMoran, a copper miner, is up like 80% in the last. So what the stock market is telling you right now is that I called this my AI theory of relativity, which is S equals CC squared instead of E equals MC squared, where S is software, C is commodities times the speed of light squared. We're getting to a point where we're going to be hardware is going to equal software, a conversion of hardware to software. And this is why, if you look at stocks like Adobe or Salesforce, they're all in the tank. They're down like 60, 70% because they're software stocks. Software is becoming a commodity. And this is the biggest thing in economics, and I'm an economics guy and a markets guy. And this is the theme that is just screaming loud and clear, is if you look at commodities, if you look at hardware, what people are realizing is that in the future, we're going to be able to take hardware and commodities and transform them into software and labor. And if we're able to do that, then the world of abundance starts to open up. And to me, that's the hope. So it's like I'm this guy that's like, okay, I don't want to give up my American privilege. I want to defend that. But at the same time, like ideally, I'd love to see the whole world rise up and do well. And I think that this is kind of almost like Elon's philosophy, which is like, let's invest in XAI, let's do the humanoids, like give up on Doge and trying to cut down the government deficit. That's a lost game, which I'm completely in agreement with. Like the U.S. deficits, they're just going to grow ad infinitum. Like this is the world that we're living in, and the way to get out of this mess that we've created is the same way we got out of the mess 200 years ago. Like people thought there's no way to feed everybody, and then what they realized is a couple of things. Is one, they realized bird shit had a lot of ammonia in it, and that was a huge deal. So basically, in the 1800s, the United States issued a law that said anybody in the U.S. could go out and claim an island as U.S. territory if it had bird shit on it, guano, as they call it. And this was because if people look at like the United States and they're like, they look at the colonies and they're like, oh, these are huge colonies. It should be able to feed everybody. What happened in the colonies was everybody was growing tobacco, corn, all this stuff. They weren't doing crop rotation. They weren't planting legumes, which, re-infiltrate the soil with nitrates and ammonia. And so they were killing the soil. And in the 1800s, we almost went to war with Peru over islands off of the coast of Peru to get bird shit because people realize if you go in and you get that bird shit, it has a lot of ammonia in it, and you could put it in all these fields. Eventually, there was a German guy who came up with a chemical way to create ammonia. This was also the same German guy that created weapons of mass destruction. He created all of the nerve gases that were used in World War I. So one guy in Germany, at the same time, he created a way to synthesize ammonia, and that ammonia became fertilizer, and that ammonia essentially allowed the population to expand to 8 billion people. But at the same time, he also created the first weapons of mass destruction. It's one of those great ironies of history. And it's kind of like nuclear weapons. Like you develop one thing, you develop the other. AI is the same way. AI has this potential to just change everything. I mean, I really do believe like we could have humanoids in 10 or 15 years that are just building houses and we don't need power lines because we could have solar, we could have Starlink internet, You can do off the grid. And if you're able to do that, if you're able to build off the grid homes, solar power, Starlink internet, and you're able to have humanoids build it, there's no shortage of homes. There's no problem with anything. So there is this path forward that I think humanity is going towards, but I think a lot of people don't want to admit it. They don't want to see it. They don't want to talk about it. They want to stay in their left or right kind of cubby holes about stuff. And I just see things more practically, which is we're moving beyond the US dollar. We're moving beyond all of this into a different world. And in 2035, 2040, if I'm still alive, I think we're going to be in a totally different world than we are now.
But from what it sounds like, you think it'll be a better world.
A much better world, yeah, which it typically has been. I mean, just human history continuing to get better and better and better. And what my point was from earlier was a lot of people are claiming with the MAGA movement, which implies Make America Great Again, that there was this higher level. I don't think there ever was a higher level. I think there was a higher level for white American native-born heterosexual males, but I think if you look at the average level of wealth of the average American, I don't think it's ever been as high as it is now.
So you touched earlier things that you think the Trump administration is doing well and things not so well. Mm-hmm. What do you think is not going well so far?
I do think he's in the pockets of the Israeli lobby. I really do. And this, like, people think this is very, like, racist or anti-Semitic. I mean, I just think it's the bottom line. I mean, there are a lot of powerful Jewish people that control a lot of shit. I mean, I don't know how you try to uncover that. And then you think about what are they doing. So when I look at what Israel is doing, in my mind, is they have a goal of genocide, which is kill Palestinians, get them off of the land. Now, where I would differ with a lot of people is a lot of people would say, well, you're saying the Israelis are genocidal. I would say that's actually what you should expect, that they're behaving in a way that is very typical for human beings to behave, and that it's very similar to the way Americans behaved when it came to claiming Western lands. So that if you have a group of people, which I believe the Israeli Jews are, a small group that has a small piece of land, and that they feel that they are being threatened by another group who is willing to kill all of them, who has actually, like, openly advocated for genocide, you know. So you're facing an enemy who is openly saying, we want to kill you, we want to kill everybody, we want to remove you from the map. That the natural response would be to respond in kind. And so I don't think that, I think they're trying to do their best to try to hide it, but I think that the Israeli foreign policy is genocide on Palestinians. And what I would say is that it's not in the United States' interest to support that. And that Donald Trump is a very practical person, and what he's doing is he's supporting that to a certain point because of political contributions and money. And so he's allowing himself to get drawn in and be the best friend of Bibi Netanyahu and support a genocide because it makes political sense for him in the short term and in the small areas. And I think that should be an area where he should stand up in the same way that he stands up to Europe, in the same way that he stands up to Ukraine, in the same way that he stands up to Zelensky. I think he should stand up to Bibi and say, look, we're not playing this game anymore because there's literally no interest. There's no interest in Israel. They don't do anything. We can move carriers into the Mediterranean. We have allies in the Middle East like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, where we can do Air Force bases. We don't need anything from Israel. The only reason I believe Trump supports Israel the way he does is because of the campaign dollars.
Well, yeah, I was watching Jared Kushner at Davos yesterday. He rolled out the what plans are for Gaza, making it look like a resort and these zones, and
Yeah.
I,
We'll see what happens because that's what he probably wants. That's probably what Trump wants, but that's not what Bibi Netanyahu wants or the hardliners in Israel want. They want the Palestinians gone. They want the West Bank. They want Gaza. They want it to be part of Greater Israel. They do not want them there, and they're doing everything in their power to make that happen without upsetting sugar daddy United States. I mean, that's basically what's going on. I think it's very obvious to anybody. I think if anybody doesn't see that, then I think they're just kidding themselves. I mean, it's like obviously like that's what they want to do, and they've been trying to do it. And then now come out, we're fighting 7 wars and doing this, and now he's probably trying to get us involved in a war in Iran, which is another huge wasp nest that just probably we do better to ignore it. Like we've got our own issues to worry about. Like I've talked about. Like in my opinion, how do you get out of this whole mess and morass I've talked about? I think the way you do that is you adopt a philosophy of what I call American autarky. And an autarky is basically a society that is self-sufficient. And that the United States should work to become self-sufficient. That we actually are one of the few nations, unlike China, which needs to import fossil fuels, we're one of the few nations where we can basically do everything we want to do and have a huge, like, amazing standard of living, and we don't need to import anything because of Alaska, because of the United States. We have rare minerals, we have oil, we have gas, we have labor. We have absolutely everything that we need. And that the best thing that we should do is like wall off the United States, defend our borders, and say to the rest of the world, have at it. Because they are 96% of the world. We are only 4% of the world's population. And we should just be like, look, we want to be a privileged 4%, live well, do well, and we should just try to divorce ourselves so that we don't care about Venezuelan oil, so we don't care about Iranian oil. But the problem is that corporations have these interests. Large corporations want this to continue. And there's a bunch of people in power that have a lot of money that want all of these global tentacles to continue. And so I'm always against these global tentacles. And sometimes that puts me on the side of Trump. Sometimes that puts me on the side of a Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. So I'm not ideological in the sense of left or right. I just think that the United States should try to head towards a path where we say, you know what, we're in a very privileged position. We're only 4.5% of the world's population. We're still 20% global GDP. We have all the resources within our borders. Let's try to become more and more self-sufficient. And this should be like a long-term 20, 30-year strategic goal that the United States no longer needs to have any international relations. And the rest of the world can go do whatever they want, and we're going to be very well defended. And once we do that, once we take care of our own house, then from a moralistic or idealistic standpoint, I would be like, okay, how can we help other people? Could we help other countries? Could we help South America? Could we help our neighbors in Mexico? Let's do that. But let's first get ourselves completely independent, move away from these foreign entanglements, as Washington talked about in his farewell speech, and take advantage of the amazing blessings that we have, which very few countries have. China doesn't have. Nobody has the blessings we have, which is labor, intelligence, capital, minerals, fossil fuels. I mean, we have everything that we need. We do not need anybody else. And that should be like, to me, the direction we head. And I think there's still people in power in Congress and corporations that want to keep this global empire going because it fills their pockets.
Yeah, and well, and so you touched on the bad things. What are the good things then you're seeing?
Mm. What do you mean? Good things with the United States?
No,
Or,
what the administration has done in the last year.
oh, well, I think one of the good things is just not bending down to the what I would call like a liberal, naive philosophy, which had taken over kind of the elites, which was like this sort of like environmental philosophy, like coming back to what I would call like a realpolitik, where you need to be honest. John Mearsheimer, um, international realism, where you're looking at the world the way it actually is, and you're not saying. I think Europe is, as I said, Europe, like white liberal women in the U.S., is just like a child. They're like a 20-year-old kid, and that kid has been growing up. You know, the Christine Lagardes, the Emmanuel Macrons. They've been growing up in the basement of the parents' house, and because of that, they've got like an allowance that they've been spending on things, which is their social safety net. But they haven't had to pay for the roof over their house. And the roof over their house has been international security. So basically, what they're now doing is they're like looking at the father. So with Biden, we had a father who was like, okay, you can live in the basement. Um, you know, the money you make from DoorDash, you can spend on your burritos, and don't worry about it. And I think with Trump, you've got like a father that comes in and says, you need to get out of this basement. We're not paying for you to live under this roof anymore. And you need to, you know, carry your own load. And I think these Europeans don't understand that yet. They don't understand how much they have sucked at our tit since 1945. And you can go back to the Marshall Plan, you can go back to anything, and you can just say, look, the entire European social safety net is built upon not needing to do anything for national defense, not needing to basically do anything except like work 30 hours a week and retire at 55. And that's all been made possible because the United States has been paying for their defense. And I think what Trump is trying to do, I mean, he probably should just break up NATO, to be honest. I think NATO is a joke. I think NATO is ridiculous. I don't think there's any reason for NATO to exist. NATO should have ended the minute the Soviet Union collapsed. The United States should have just said, you know what, Europe, you're on your own. You do what you want to do. And I'll tell you what about Russia. Russia can go into Ukraine. They can take Ukraine. Who cares? They can even go a little bit further. But I'll tell you what, once they get to Poland, they're going to be stopped. Poland is extremely strong. Poland has an amazing economy. Poland is buying more gold than any other central bank in the world right now. Poland would stop the Russians in their tracks. And so Russia ain't getting anywhere. We don't need to be involved in it. There's no reason why we need to be involved in this. They might be able to take Ukraine. Good. Let them have it. Let them take Kyiv. Let them have the whole Ukraine. Who cares? I don't care.
Yeah, it doesn't impact you or I. What happens over there? Take Odessa. You want?
Yeah. Who cares about Odessa? I mean, this is the ridiculousness that the United States. I saw bills last year, Mike, $61 billion United States money to protect Odessa. Why? Why are we protecting these places? I'll tell you why. Because of Larry Fink, because of these international corporations, because there's a bunch of hedge funds that own Ukrainian bonds. That's why, because there's no U.S. strategic interest in Russia not taking over all of Ukraine, and they don't have the juice to keep going. They just don't. Without our help, they don't need our help. Poland does not need our help. Poland was a huge empire. Poland used to control Ukraine. Poland can stop the Russians in their tracks. They don't need us. It's just absolutely insanity. All that's going on is there's this battle between Trump's instincts, which I think are for the American people, but he's also dealing with this deep state blob, which is controlled by foreign policy BSers and corporate interests. And those corporate interests are strong, and they are very much embedded in Eastern Europe. They're embedded in Africa. They're embedded in Asia. There's no reason. Like, I will say that Taiwan, because of the fact that they create all of the semiconductors, like, we need to protect Taiwan. Like, Taiwan, until we can have our own fabs, and that's why, you look at a stock like Intel is up like, 50% this year to date. Why is it up that much? Because people are starting to and TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor, they're building fabs, and by fabs I mean like fabrication plants to create micro and computer chips in the United States. Right now, the United States would be dead in the water if China took Taiwan. Like Russia could take Ukraine, doesn't matter. China takes Taiwan, it's going to matter. Because we don't manufacture enough chips. And this is the CHIPS Act. This is what Trump is doing with investment in Intel. This is all of this stuff that we need to do. Bessent said it, Scott Bessent, on Meet the Press or whatever this weekend. He's like, COVID showed us 5 or 6 areas where we're just not self-sufficient. And China can basically cut us off at the balls anytime they want. So we can't let that continue. We have to solve that problem, but we can't solve it in a year or 2 years. It's going to take 3, 5, 6, 7 years. But what we need to do is solve that problem, have our own critical minerals, have our own computer chips, and then we can tell the world, do whatever. But right now, we're in the pocket of China for a lot of stuff. And so every time Trump tries to get tough with China and throw out tariffs, China just says, okay, we're cutting off rare earths. And then Trump's like, okay, sorry, didn't mean to do it. Because they've got us in the back pocket right now until we solve these problems, and we got to solve them.
Well, and that first, going back to Russia for a second, and who am I, right? What do I know? But I don't think Putin wants Europe. Who would want that disaster? Why would he want that at this point? What is the value in going into France, Spain, Italy? I mean, the food in Italy, but I mean, he could just.
He's not going into any of those places.
No, I know.
They don't have enough people, Mike. I mean, Russia is 180 million people. Western Europe is 1 billion people. There's no threat to Western Europe from Russia. There is no threat. It's all BS to protect corporate economic interests in Eastern Europe.
Why would they want it anyway, though? What is the value?
Exactly.
I mean, except for the food in Italy, but he can just go there and have a meal.
No, it's all a joke.
I'm kidding.
Everything on these media people, they're all a joke, Mike. I mean, honestly, like I listen to Bloomberg, I listen to CNBC, I listen to NBC, and these people, and they're worried about Greenland, and they're. It's such a farce. It's so farcical. It's a circus. It literally is like if you sit back and you step back and you look at what is actually the situation of the world, you understand completely this is just a bunch of corporate interests. You look at the media, who's it controlled by? All right? A lot of them are Jewish. Okay, why are they talking about Israel? Like why is all of this happening? Like, this is the way the world works. And if people don't want to admit it, or they want to say this is racist, or they want to say this is American privilege or whatever, be my guest. But I'm not here to tell anybody anything other than the way I see things. And the way I see things is that there is a group of people here in the United States that have become very accustomed to a high standard of living. That standard of living is continuing to get cut down because of globalization, immigration, all of these things. And if we don't stand up for it and say no, and stop the pretense of trying to be moral, let the pretense of morality go away.
You can't have both. Is what you're saying, Mel.
Yeah, I'm not here to defend it on moral grounds. I'm here to defend it on. I'm a tribal person. There's about 40 people in the world that I give a shit about. Everybody else I really could care less. I care about my family. I care about my friends. I care about these people. I want these people to do well. And I think everybody around the world feels the same way. And if what you do is you say, oh, I want to think about the whole world, what's going to happen is there's going to be people that grew up in the slums of India or somewhere, and they're going to say, okay, you can be that kind of a cheap sucker and think that way. I'm not that way. I'm going to go take from you. And they're going to come and take from us. And that's what the Venezuelans have been doing. My wife was Colombian born. I have family in Venezuela. My wife's aunt and cousins all live in Caracas. My wife was born and raised in Medellin in the 80s and 90s under Pablo Escobar's regime. Like, she knows how the world works, and it doesn't work the way a lot of these white women in Minneapolis think it does. It works where it's controlled by brutal men who rape women, people who are killers, people who will take from you anything you have. And if you think that you can just go out there and say, oh, let's all be peace, love, and happiness, and that's all going to be good, that's going to be good until like the 40% of the world's population that grew up poor, getting beaten the head by their father, is going to come after you and say, I don't see the world that way, and take what you have. And unless you have good people stand up and say, enough is enough, that's what's going to happen. It's going to happen every time, and 6 times on Sunday, man. It's going to happen every single time.
Do you feel the with an example like Minneapolis right now and the deterioration of the cities? Well, let me ask you. I mean, you see the deterioration in these major cities. I mean, Charlotte, Minneapolis, Chicago. I mean, going on, LA,
yeah.
Portland, Seattle, Phoenix, where I live, so on and so forth. Do you see it heading towards that direction right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're heading towards that direction, and so is Western Europe. We're heading to giving up all of our privilege. Like,
no, I mean, I'm sorry, Mel. I mean, in terms of like some kinetic unrest worse than what we're seeing right now in the United States.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. It's probably going to head to that, because I think there's just too much difference on first principles, where like there are people like me who are unapologetic about wanting to preserve American privilege, and there are other people who fundamentally believe that's wrong. And it's like, how do you settle that with the discussion? Like, if I get in a discussion with one of these Minneapolis women, and I say, look, I want to continue privilege, they're going to just, on the face, they're just going to say, no, that's not what I believe. I believe we should try to be equal to everybody and give it. And so we disagree on first principles. And once you have that, and you have a significant group, and so, yeah, I mean, I think that's probably to be expected, is some sort of a civil war. We're probably heading towards that, which we've had many times before. Either rebellions, insurrections, civil wars. You can go back to like 20 years after the American Revolution, the Whiskey Rebellion in the Appalachian States, where they rebelled against the government. I mean, I do think that the Insurrection Act, by the time Trump's term is over, he's going to call in the Insurrection Act. I'm almost completely positive of it, because I just think that's where it's heading. And, I live in North Carolina right now. I mean, like, you can drive not too far from here and just find battlefields where thousands of Americans were killed by other thousands of Americans. To me, it's like not to be like thought of as impossible. Like we're getting to a point where there are people that just would probably listen to everything I've had to say right now and say this guy should be shot because he's just a white supremacist crazy dude. And it's like, I don't see myself that way. I see myself as a good family man, a good person, a good American. But other people would probably listen to the things I'm saying and say, this guy is everything that's wrong. And some of those people, especially some of those women, I mean, they really do seem psychologically deranged to me. Like there's something going on, They're taking a lot of prescription medications. I mean, I think there's a lot of that going on. You don't see it. You don't see Hispanic people. You don't see my half of my family is Hispanic because, like I said, these people are all for all of this. Like everybody is for all of this. This isn't a white thing or a black thing or a Hispanic thing or a brown thing. This is like, don't you understand how the world works? Like, we cannot have everybody come here and move in and get education and health care and everything and keep doing it without bankrupting ourselves. I mean, it's a very simple analogy, but I say, love, what if we said we're going to open up our house and anybody who wants to come for dinner can come? The first few nights, a few people come and we satisfy them. What happens after 10 nights, 100 nights? And then we have 1,000 people showing up at our doorstep. All our money's going to be gone. Soon enough. Like, that's what's going on. We just can't do it. It's not about being moral. It's not about being right. It's not about white supremacy. It's not about any of the, like, it's about reality. We just cannot have an open border. We cannot let people in. We can't keep doing these things. We have to defend ourselves. And we can't let people say that defending ourselves is racism and be afraid of it. And say, well, if you just try to defend it, you're just a racist and a white supremacist. If that's what we allow to happen, then we deserve everything we get.
Yeah, people can't handle objectivity, and I think more people feel the way you do, but they just won't admit it for whatever reason. They can't because of their jobs. They can't, I don't know. And also, I think there's a percentage of people that have had it good for very, very long and taken it all for granted, and they don't think that these things are going to touch them. You know, my friend
Steve. And they don't understand that it comes at a cost. That the reason you had it good for so long was because it came at a cost of another. And admitting that. And saying, yes, the United States was built on slavery. Yes, the United States was built on segregation. And the way that all this came to be, and now we're doing the right thing. And we're saying, let's let everybody in. That's a U.S. citizen. And then that brings down the average. And so that's the other thing, is that a lot of people are trying to compare themselves to the average of what I call the American heterosexual native-born white man. If you do that, you're not comparing yourself to the average American. So a lot of this MAGA stuff is like looking back at the 1950s and 1960s and saying, we're worse off than we used to be. And what I'm saying is, as an average person, you're not. If you're looking and trying to compare to the average white American native-born heterosexual man, then yes, we are in a worse position. But actually, overall, we're in a better position now than we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And we're continuing to improve. And what I'm saying is, let AI do its thing. Let all this stuff happen. And we can solve these Malthusian problems. Like the people that thought, oh, well, the world, Malthus, I think he did calculations, and he said at 2.2 billion people, the world will begin to die of starvation. We're now at like 8 billion. Like, a lot of people are thinking we cannot get to these higher levels. I think we need to get to these higher levels, but we also need to be aware and open and honest about how we got to these higher levels, and that it's not about, like I said, you look at the Philippines. Most people have no idea that the Philippines were part of the United States for 47 years. They don't know that after we beat Spain, we took over the Philippines. They don't know any of this territorial history of how the United States was built. And so they look back, and they're just looking at it through these rose-colored glasses of like, oh, the United States was this egalitarian, open society. I mean, bullshit. I mean, we had quotas on racial, immigration. Like, a lot. That's another big myth that a lot of people say, is the United States was built on immigration, and we were built on open immigration, and we were built. No, we weren't.
Everybody's from somewhere else, Mel. I had to correct a friend of mine. Well, I'm not. You're not.
But we closed immigration. We closed it. Like, we did not have open immigration where anybody could come in from anywhere at any time. We had people at Ellis Island, doing medical checks. We had racial quotas that turned away Japanese or Chinese people that wanted to come here. So, yes, everybody here is from somewhere, but it was under a controlled, desired group. It was not under open it up and anybody can come from anywhere. I mean, that's not what you're saying, are you, Mike?
No.
That anybody could come from
No,
anywhere?
not at all. I laugh at when people would say, or I would hear politicians, the pro let everybody in. They say, well, we're all from somewhere else. Well, I'm not. Yeah. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I guess that's from somewhere else. But I mean,
exactly.
My grandparents were born here.
Born in Illinois.
3 out of 4 of my grandparents were born here.
Oh my gosh, Mike, it's so ridiculous. I'll tell you one other thing. This is the biggest thing that honestly gets me, is when I was listening to Ken Burns' Revolution documentary. And it opens up with like a segment talking about how before the white colonists came, the Native Americans were living on this land for hundreds. I think the word he used was hundreds of generations. It's more like 2. Okay? When you go in and you take away the Dakota people's land, and then the Dakotas say, well, we were on this land for hundreds of generations. Again, bullshit. The Dakotas took it away from other tribes. There was huge tribal warfare going on. Most of the Native American lands that the United States people took were owned by Native Americans for less than 2 generations. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, white people came in and took it away from people that had, okay, if you look at Native Americans as a big group and you don't look at Native Americans as they really are, which is different tribes, and they were fighting each other, taking each other's land, it was getting swapped out. You got the Sioux, you got all of these things. The white people that now live in North Dakota have lived there much longer than the Dakota tribe lived there prior to them being there. That's a fact. People don't want to hear it. They want to think that, oh, the Dakotas were there for 1,000 years. No, they weren't. They were there for like 40 years. And then the white people came in and took it away from them. So all this, I mean, it's all bullshit. It's everything is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the white way, I mean, it's like, you look at the world the way it really is, it is not at all the way a Ken Burns documentary presents it. It's a completely messy, muddy thing that just does not make a lot of sense if you look at it through a white liberal lens. But if you look at it through the lens of my cats and how my cats behave and how they're territorial and how they kill birds and rabbits and they fight off other cats, if you look at the world through my cat's eyes, it all makes sense. If you look at the world through this white liberal lens, then yeah, it's all messed up. And too many kids have been taught in colleges and everything else to look at the world through this, primrose glasses. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And they just need to grow up. They really need to grow up. And I think the world is starting to grow up a little bit because it has to, not because of Donald Trump. I don't think that Donald Trump is speeding some things along, but I think what's happening is there's a change in the global geopolitical dynamics that is going to happen one way or another. And Donald Trump, 10 years from now, he's going to be dead. These same themes are going to continue on because they're just the way the world works.
Yeah, and I think that no matter who was sitting in that chair, to your point, we're heading in this direction no matter what. And I've told this story. I'll share it with you really quick. Last summer I was in Virginia, Reston, Virginia, and my friend and I started talking to this guy who worked for Amazon Web Services, and he built data centers. He's in engineering. And he was telling us, all these centers that they had planned. And I kind of sarcastically said, I bet you this didn't start when Trump got, reelected. He goes, oh, no, this has been in the works for a very long time. And I'll tell you, Mel, it was one of the biggest eye-openers for me, like, to realize, not that I didn't realize it before, but it was like it gave me clarity. Like, I don't even know if it matters who sits in that seat. Like these things are
It
heading
doesn't
in that
matter. It
direction.
doesn't matter, Mike. Did they get rid of the China tariffs that Trump put on in the first term when Biden came in? No. This is all just naturally going to happen. And this whole Trump thing is basically an illusion and a deception because people are thinking this is because of Trump. This isn't because of Trump. This is because of the way the world is heading. We have gone from over 5% of the world's population, over 50% of the world's GDP, to like 4% of the world's population and 20% of the world. And our importance is shrinking. And yet we want to maintain our levels of wealth and everything. And that requires a complete change in thing. I mean, we were so powerful after World War II. We were the only nation with nuclear weapons. We were the only developed nation that was not basically completely destroyed. We basically had the world at our fingertips. And then what happened was there was a bifurcation of the world. There was the Soviet Union world, and we ruled like, no problem over our world. Then the Soviet Union fell, and we basically ruled over the whole world. And then we got to a point where it became clear, like, okay, Russia has nuclear weapons. China has nuclear weapons. China and Russia have pretty advanced things. I mean, let's not forget, Russia was the first country to put somebody into space. They're not idiots. Until recently, we had to use them to send people to the space station because we didn't even have a space shuttle. Russia and China are pretty powerful, and we can't tell them what to do. And they have spheres of influence, and they're going to do what they're going to do, and we're going to do what we're going to do. And that's just the way the world is. The U.S. is not some head honcho that just gets to tell everybody what to do anymore. And that really is why everybody's going to gold. I mean, gold, I tie it back to economics, man. Every time gold goes down, you just got to buy it. Like, it's going to do better than the stock market. It's going to do better. It's at like 4,800. It might go down. It might go up 100. Or, I mean, gold is going to $25,000 an ounce. I mean, in my opinion, silver we'll see because silver's a separate case. But gold is like we're going back to a gold-based monetary system. The U.S. dollar as a reserve currency is long dead. I have said for a long time, a lot of people say, well, the United States made a mistake seizing Russian assets in 2022 because that's hastening the end of the U.S. dollar reserve currency status. I think that the United States seized Russian assets in 2022 because they knew that this whole dollar system bullshit was over. This whole idea of the U.S. can just print dollars and everybody's going to send us furniture and cars and that whole game it's absolutely over. Like that was an amazing game that we played from basically 1945 until I would say about 5 years ago, and now nobody cares, and that's why the Treasury is just going to keep printing. Everybody's just going to keep printing. This is why gold keeps going up every day. It's like people are realizing like the dollar system is done. It is done. That's not like, oh, it's going to happen. Oh, China's going to sell its treasuries. Like all this stuff it's all over. It's a done deal. Dollar is done. Gold is now money, as it has been for thousands of years and was, except for 1945 to 1975. Other than those 30 years in human history, gold is money. Gold is money once again. I don't see any way that gold's not going to 10, 12, 15,000 by the end of the decade. Like people just keep looking at it and saying, why does it keep going up? Why is gold like it's going to keep going up? I mean, I'll come back on here in a year and I'll bet you gold's at 6,000, 7,000. I mean, it's just not ending. Like gold is now money again.
Do you also think it contributes? When I had Ed Dowd on, he mentioned there's no trust in the system anymore, and that's another reason why gold keeps going up and up and up.
Yeah, I mean gold. I mean U.S. equities. I mean, you look at all these things. You look at the major asset classes. And if people go to my Twitter feed, Mel Mattison 1, they will see from the very beginning, years ago, I said gold is my biggest holding. Gold has always been my biggest holding. I wrote a book called Quoz, Quoz. I wrote it in 2022, and it was about Indian, Russian, and China central banks like reinstating gold as the primary currency, and gold goes to $25,000 an ounce in my novel, and it takes place in 2027. It might just actually happen. Like I literally wrote a fictional financial thriller novel where gold goes to $25,000 an ounce. Gold was at $2,000 an ounce when I wrote it. And I was like, by 2027, 2028, it's in the 20s. And I think it could be, I mean, this whole thing, the dollar is just toilet paper now. Like, and people that say, oh, we're ruining the dollar status or going into Venezuela, like, I think it's completely over. The only reason you don't have accelerated selling of treasuries and things like that is people don't want to shoot themselves in the foot. So the U.S. has already given up on the dollar being like a basis. Like, I think people talk about like, oh, we need to be careful because we're going to lose the dollar as the reserve currency. I think we've already lost it. And I think the United States knows that. I think everybody knows that. And I think if the United States was smart, it would buy gold. And it might be buying gold. Like, who knows? Who knows if Fort Knox is empty and they started buying gold on the back end? And, you know, I mean, who knows what's going on with gold? But all I can tell you is I look at those gold charts, and every time I think it should pull back and go down, it doesn't. It just keeps going up. And I think gold is, I mean, I love gold. I love silver. I mean, I've owned precious metals for so long. I actually had my microphone sitting on 1,000 or 100-ounce bar of silver. Like, precious metal, I've been a believer in precious metals for a long ass time. I bought this bar of silver for $1,100. Now it's like 9,000. Like, gold and silver, they are now the basis once again of the monetary system. And it's not the dollar anymore. The dollar is dead. The dollar is meaningless. And it's all about cash flows. You know, equities can provide cash flows, so they can be inflation hedges. Commodities, copper, you know, I mean, but the dollar, no. U.S. Treasuries, no. No, nobody wants to own those anymore. They're toilet paper.
Well, and I was talking to a friend of mine last night. You know, and we were talking about like GDP, and he was saying that the GDP it's a 4% growth, which I haven't seen that anywhere. So maybe you can, you know, if you're familiar with it, but
Atlanta Fed GDP now has GDP at 5.2%. Actually,
do you believe that's real?
I mean, it
I don't
could
trust
be.
anything,
I mean,
Mel. I don't trust anything. So that's, yeah, you're smarter than me.
here's the thing. I think we're going to see high GDP numbers, but these are like nominal GDP numbers. These are numbers that are denominated in dollars. Denominate that GDP in gold. If gold is up 20% in the last three months, and GDP is up 5%, then in gold GDP was down 20% the last quarter. So what we're having the dollar is you know, like a house that's 400,000 now is going to be $1 million in 5 years. Stocks that, I mean, the dollar is no longer a means of a store of value. So I don't store any money in dollars. I mean, I have my money in stocks. I have my money in precious metals. I have a little bit of cash to just pay the bills out of a checking account. And even though I want some cash as an emergency fund, it's sitting in a T-bill ETF, BIL, that's at least paying 4%. But nobody's holding cash anymore. You can't hold cash. Dollars are, like I said, they're toilet paper. And so if you say, okay, nominal GDP is 10%, and then in inflation terms, it's going to be 4%, But what is it in gold terms? What is it in silver terms? It's negative 20%. It's negative 25%. Gold and silver are, this is the way I start off my novel Clause, is a quote from J.P. Morgan economist. Gold is money, nothing else. Like, gold is money. People forgot that for about 30 or 40 years, and they thought U.S. Treasuries were money. Those days are over. And I think a lot of people are trying to say, be careful, we're going to lose reserve status. I think we've already lost it. I don't think the dollar is looked at as reserve status. China, the only reason these people aren't selling more of their bonds is because they know that if they dump it on the market, they're just going to shoot themselves in the foot. But nobody's adding. Poland buying, just announced like 700 metric tons of gold authorization. Polish central bank. I follow all these central banks. I mean, all they're doing is just buying gold and forgetting about treasuries. Like, this is a once in a generation type move in gold. The last time it happened was 1971. U.S. goes off the gold standard. Gold was $35 an ounce. Within 10 years, from 1971 to 1980, gold went from $35 an ounce to over 800. That's a 25x increase. If you look at what gold started this run at, it was around 2000. You do a 25x increase on 2000, you're at $50,000 gold. $50,000 an ounce. So when people come on and they're like, oh, well, this is too expensive. Gold's 4,800. Gold's 4,900. I honestly think it's going to $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in my lifetime. I have an ounce. I have Cougarons of gold that I bought for $300 in 2004. I think at some point they're going to be worth $30,000. I think gold is now the way the whole economic system is reverting to gold, and nobody wants to say it. Because if people come on CNBC and tell you this, number one, they might be looked at as crazy. And number two, it's not going to serve their employers. Because the people that come on and see CNBC, they work for Morgan Stanley, they work for JP Morgan, they want you to invest in stocks. They don't want you to buy a piece of metal that you don't need to custody with them, that you don't need them. Like, they can't charge 1% a year to manage it. like with gold, you can buy gold and you can just own it, and nobody gets a cent of it. But if you want to own stocks, Morgan Stanley, oh, we want to manage your portfolio. We're going to charge you 1-2%. So they're not going to tell you gold's going to $20,000, $30,000 an ounce. They're going to say, oh, well, gold's going up. We recommend healthy allocation, but you really want to be in equities. Well, how is that done? I mean, how is it? The S&P 500, last time I checked, was up 0.5% year to date. Gold, last time I checked, was up like 12% year to date. So people are going into gold. Gold is China. I mean, all these commercials that have been on for years about buy gold, don't trust the system, all of that. I think it's actually just beginning. I think this 4,800 level that we hit, yeah, we can pull back, but I wouldn't be surprised, like I said, if we're at $10,000 an ounce 1-2 years from now, and people are going to say, wow, how did this happen? And it's like, because you can't settle in U.S. Treasuries anymore. U.S. Treasuries are toilet paper, so you got to settle in gold.
Plus, if these people, these analysts on CNBC and these networks, if they were to say that, it potentially would cause a huge bank run on their employers.
Yeah, if the Fed said that, if Jerome Powell said that, they can't say that. Nobody can say that. Nobody can say it. You have to have people, and there are other people, on YouTube and different places that are saying the same thing as I am. But it's like, you can't go on mass media and say that. Even Fox Business, they don't want you to say that. They don't want you to say that you're going to make more money buying gold than you are by buying the S&P 500. Because here's the deal. The entire 401k pension system of the United States is the S&P 500. In 2022, we had the S&P 500 go down 20% because of capital gains taxes, which is what's funding the government. The stock market went down, and then tax receipts went down because the capital gains taxes weren't there. People were able to take. So the stock market is it's a political thing right now. Like, you have to have the stock market going up. If the stock market doesn't go up in nominal terms, what you do is you get losses. If you get losses, you get people that they can then sell their stocks, take tax losses, and you kill tax receipts. I mean, this is very, very clear to people that follow this, that this is why we haven't had a recession since 2009 of any meaningful consequence. The U.S. government cannot allow a recession. They cannot allow the stock market to go down. They have to keep the S&P 500 pumped up, because if they allow it to go down like they did in 2022, you kill tax receipts, you have blowout deficits. Those blowout deficits then threaten treasury bonds, which the yields then go up on treasury bonds. So we have a situation that's called, in economic terms, fiscal dominance, where essentially the fiscal situation in the United States dominates monetary policy. It dominates the stock market. We can no longer allow any of this to occur. But what we are having is the stock market go down in terms of gold. So the stock market keeps going up in nominal terms, keeps going down in gold terms. Now, over the next week, month, 2 months, could the stock market outperform gold? Absolutely. Do I think that's going to happen over the next 2-3 years? I don't think there's a chance in hell. I think gold's just going to keep outperforming the stock market.
Do you see the stock market coming back to some sort of reality, or is it just going to continue?
No, I think it's just the dollar just keeps getting devalued. So the nominal stock market goes up, the dollar keeps getting devalued, gold keeps going even higher. So you have the stock market going up in dollar terms, down in gold terms, which has been going on for years, and I think it's still going to continue. And so all these people, this is what I talked about in the beginning, is these people calling for a stock market crash. I just don't think it's happening. I think in nominal terms, the stock market's going to keep going up because it has to. Because if it goes down, it's going to crash tax receipts. It's going to ruin the whole system. But what you're going to see is you're seeing investment managers, you're seeing guys like me saying, hey, I would rather own more of gold than I would of the S&P or the NASDAQ. The other thing is non-USD dollar denominated assets, which are absolutely killing it this year. You look at a stock like Alibaba, or you look at emerging markets, or you look at, EWZ, the Brazilian ETF. The Brazilian ETF was up 50% last year. It's already up 20% this year. I own so much more of Brazil, the Ibovespa, which is the São Paulo stock market, than I do of the S&P 500. I don't want to own the S&P 500. I don't want to own the NASDAQ. I want to own gold. I want to own emerging market equities. I want to own China. I want to own things that are not denominated in U.S. dollars because, like I said 10 times already, USTs are toilet paper.
Then do you also see real estate just continuing to go up?
Yeah, it'll go up in dollar terms. I mean, I think that's what's happening, but I think there are, so if you look at like equity valuations, like a lot of common way to value equities is like price to earnings, and like U.S. equities are like 25 times on the S&P or 30 times on the NASDAQ. And then you look at, things like the Brazilian stock market or Chinese stock market, Hong Kong, the Hang Seng, they're like 14, 15 times earnings. They're still relatively very cheap. And it's like, it's just a convergence. And then people are surprised, like it's some sort of magic thought process to understand this. It's very simple. This is what is happening. There's an outperformance of commodity-related names, emerging market names, non-U.S. dollar denominated names, and then nominally, the S&P 500 goes up, but like I said, it's up like 0.5% so far this year. And then you look at something else. I mean, I'm going to go into my trading view and just to give you an example. Okay, S&P 500 as of the second, 0.76%. So less than 1% year to date. I look at something like the Brazilian stock market. Year to date, 11.46%. I mean, what do you want to be in? I mean, the Brazilian stock market is up 11.46%. The S&P 500 is up 0.7. Like, this is what I own. This is how I'm making money. You look at gold. I mean,
Yeah, what's gold at today? I
ridiculous.
was going to ask you.
As we're talking, 49.16.
What's silver?
Silver, 95.95, up 3%. This was after the sell-off. So yesterday, you had the Greenland thing. Gold, silver sold off. Now they're back at new highs. You look at gold. Year-to-date performance, 13.8. So you got gold up 13.8, Brazil 11.6, S&P 500 0.7. What's that telling you? I mean, it's people that have 401ks. This is news you can use. You need to get that money out of 401ks because a lot of people have 401ks, and you can. It depends on the plan benefits. Even if you're still working, you should see if you can pull your money out of the 401k, even if you're still working. Because what happens is a lot of 401, I'm doing this with my wife's right now, where she is in a 401k because she's been in her job a while. And she had an old 401k, rolled it over into an IRA. I started managing it. Over the last year, I'm up 112%. S&P 500 is up about 15% in the last year. Then she has a 401k at Duke. And I said, you need to check the plan to see if you can remove the assets because they have a provider that only allows you to, like, if you want to invest in equities, it's just indexes. It's like, I'm going to invest in they don't even have a gold. She's got a lot of money in a 401k. She can't even put it into gold. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, you need to get that money out of the 401k if you can, move it into a Robinhood account, which has almost no trading fees. And then I can start investing it in things like Brazil and gold and silver and other things. Because right now, you're in some 401k that's basically telling you you have to invest in like U.S. developed or international developed. There's a lot of people, and what's happening is a lot of people are realizing this, and they're doing it at the same time. And they're saying, oh my God, I need to go into Brazil. I need to go into Taiwan Semiconductor. I need to go into EEM, which is the Emerging Markets ETF, which if I look at EEM is up.
So while you're looking at that, even if you take the hit on the 401k, you're saying it's, in your view, better to
5.3. No. You don't need to take the hit. No, it's just rolling it over into an IRA.
In a Robinhood account.
Yeah, so a lot of people have 401ks that are managed by like a Fidelity, and they have a very limited investment choice. And they're basically major indexes. And if you take that cash out to spend it, you get hit with a 10% penalty. But let's say you have a 401k, you leave a job, you're absolutely, in every single case, you're allowed to roll that over into an IRA. It has to go directly into an IRA where you do not pay any tax penalty. The other situation is that people that have been in jobs for a long time, they have cash built up in 401ks. And so the question is, can you roll that cash over while still contributing? And sometimes it gets tricky because there's vesting and everything else. And some plans, and these are in plan documents, ESOPs. I mean, I'm a CFP. I'm a certified financial planner. I mean, I've worked in finance for 30 years, so I know all these, nitty-gritty details. But basically, like, you can roll that over in certain circumstances, but in certain circumstances you can't because it hasn't vested yet, or the ESOP, Employee Stock Option Plan, or the ERISA, which is the Employee Retirement Institution Systems Act or whatever the plan is governed by, it might not allow you to roll that over while you're still employed, meaning you have to keep it in your 401k with the provider that you have, whether you like it or not. And they have certain, I see my face going back and forth.
Yeah, it's looking like a Max Headroom video for a second, but it can still hear you, so that's okay. It'll correct itself.
So, anyways, what I'm saying is, like, if you did leave a job and you have, like, just assets sitting in a 401k, and you're just like, oh well, the investment choices are S&P 500, or yeah, I would say roll that over somewhere. It doesn't have to be Robinhood. I'm not paid by Robinhood or anything. I just think Robinhood, even though they're known for being kind of like amateurish, they have all these deals. So they'll give you like a 3% match. So let's say you have $100,000 in a 401k. You roll that, you take that out of the 401k, immediately they'll give you $3,000. Now you have $103,000, and then you have all of these other investment decisions open. And I mean, this is like what so many Americans should do, but they're not, because, they're told, just go to work, invest in your paycheck, 10% go into a 401k, goes into the 401k. The 401k invested into like a target date fund, which is like 60% equities. And of that, like 75% of it is U.S. equities. And then that target date fund returns like 10% last year, while something like Brazil returns 50%. I mean, it's not complex. It's easy. And there are so many people that have tons of money in 401ks, and they're making like 10, 15%. And if they just realize, as I said, treasuries are trash, USD is trash, going to gold, going to foreign markets, they'd be up 50, 60, 70, 100% in the last year. I've been saying that for years, and I think it's going to be happening. It's still going to happen. I come back here, it's January 22nd. Come back here January 2027, and we'll see, what does the EEM, which is the emerging markets, do compared to like the S&P 500. And I'll bet you it's going to be ridiculous. It's going to be some ridiculous. That's something like emerging markets are up like 70%, and the S&P 500 is up 10%. And they're going to think, oh, this is great. I made 10%.
How does I know I'm kind of running out of time here with you, but how does Bitcoin and crypto, how does it look to you as we're moving into this new world?
Yeah. Well, Bitcoin, I thought that Bitcoin was possibly ready to just kind of be like a new type of gold, a digital gold for the younger generations. And I thought, okay, we're ready to, go up. and this was back in October. So I have made a lot of like different calls on equities and different things that have been very spot on. I was wrong on Bitcoin. In like October or November, as Bitcoin got around 100,000, I thought it was ready to bounce and go up. I think that Bitcoin has just not been accepted yet as a true store of value in the way that gold is. And obviously, you know, the central banks, Italy, Poland, China, they're not buying Bitcoin, they're buying gold. And you've got a buyer. You've got a buyer that's not going away, that continues to buy, no matter what the price, what we would call an inelastic buyer. And that's these central banks are buying gold. And that's why I keep harping on gold. I think Bitcoin has a lot of potential, but I've been wrong, and so I'm hesitant to throw out my opinions because I've been wrong in the past. I think Bitcoin looks like it should be ready to go up. That like there's a little bit of institutional adoption. It's still a small amount. If you add up all the Bitcoin in the world, it's like 1.7 trillion. Gold has increased by over $10 trillion in just the last year. So if you think gold has gone up like 5-6x in the last year compared to the entire value of every Bitcoin in the world, like if Bitcoin could just go up a little bit relative to gold, it would be amazing. But it's just not doing it. I still think there's potential there, but I think there's some people that are worried about quantum. And I think the thing that a lot of people that are big into Bitcoin have said for a long time is Bitcoin is great, it's amazing, it's a cap supply. But I don't think they really understood the value of gold, which is it's completely untraceable. That you can buy gold, bring it somewhere, melt it down, reformat it into bars, and nobody knows. Bitcoin has what they call like a triple ledger system. It's a public, like every single Bitcoin transaction that has ever happened is available for everybody to see. Central banks don't want that. So Bitcoin has a lot of negatives compared to gold, even though a lot of Bitcoiners will say, oh, Bitcoin's superior. But I'm not giving up on it yet, but I'm not making any big moves into Bitcoin because I'm just not confident about my ability to understand it because I've been wrong about it. I've been right about equities. I've been right about gold. I've been right about a lot of things. Every time I try to make a call on Bitcoin, like we're bottom, buy Bitcoin, I've been wrong. And, you know, so I stay away from Bitcoin. I don't know what's going on with it.
What about the whole crypto stablecoin Genius Act?
Yeah. Well, that has a lot to do with it. There was supposedly this bill called the, what was it called? It was almost passed, the Clarity Act, which is essentially all the regulations around crypto. And it was almost ready to move out of the Senate last week. And the CEO of Coinbase came out and he said, you know what, this bill is bad. We don't want it passed. It's better to have no bill than this bill. And that's what basically sent Bitcoin tanking, along with Bitcoin associated names like Robinhood or a SoFi or whatever, if people follow the markets. So, you know, I still think eventually we'll get it, but we'll get a Clarity Act. I just think that Bitcoin, as far as like something that's going to like double or triple in like a year, I think probably not. Like it's probably heading to a digital asset that can provide a function in a portfolio, but I just don't see it as like, oh, it's going to go to $1 million in 5 years. Like it's going to go up. I think it's still going to perform well over long run. But I think the opportunity that it once presented, which was like buy it at 1,000 and then it goes to 100,000, I think that opportunity is gone. And so there's a lot of people that were in it from the beginning that are saying, hey, I'm selling. They call them OG whales, right? So a lot of OG whales have been getting out of Bitcoin, and they've been saying, look, I bought this thing at $1,000 a coin. I'm selling. It's 90,000 a coin right now. I'm getting out. And so I think Bitcoin is not going away. I don't think it's dead and going to zero. I think it's just becoming an asset, and it's probably to be expected to trade up and down in the way other assets do. It's not even worth half of what Google's worth or half of what Nvidia's worth. It's worth a fraction of gold. It's worth a fraction of what silver. It's basically a small asset now that I think could do good still and be a good bet on a percentage basis. But the opportunity that you had with Bitcoin to buy it in 2010 for, $200 and then it goes to 90,000, that opportunity is gone.
Do you think that you bring up Nvidia? Do you see that company? Because some people will predict that it's way overvalued and should not be as high as it is from a market cap standpoint. What are your thoughts on it, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, I think Nvidia and some of these mega cap companies have been in a very long consolidation period. So they've been going up. You look at Nvidia was like $89 a share in April, and then it went to 212, and now it's been bouncing around. I think a lot of these big stocks, Google, Nvidia, Apple. But again, I don't like these stocks as far as like where I would want to invest my money. I have almost no money invested in Nvidia or Apple or Google or Microsoft. I just don't think those are not the stocks that they can go up, they can do well. But if you think about it, there are so many pension plans, hedge funds, retail investors that own a lot of those, and they're already huge. Like, why would you want to own something like emerging markets, Alibaba, something like a commodity play, like an Alcoa or a Freeport-McMoRan? And these are just doing a lot better. And I think people are just looking at some of these mega caps like, yeah, they're not going away. I mean, Amazon's not going to go bankrupt. Apple's not going to go bankrupt.
I don't think they would. They wouldn't let it. They wouldn't let it. They wouldn't let those companies fail.
But is Apple going to triple in the next 3 years? No.
When's the last time they did something relevant?
No, exactly. They're going to be mainstays of the market, and I mean, this is why the U.S. just keeps getting killed in like stock market performance. I mean, absolutely killed. I mean, we just talked about emerging markets, Brazil. I mean, I can look at other ones. I can look at, EWW, Mexico. It's up. Mexico's up 8.3% year to date. It's up 56% in the last year. That's in dollar terms. That's not like taking apart currency. Why do you want to own the S&P 500? When Mexico's up 56%, Brazil's up 50%. I mean, why are you buying the NASDAQ and Apple? And that's why these things like don't do anything, and everybody's looking at their portfolios and saying, wait a minute, I thought these were the greatest companies in the world. They kept going up like crazy because people started to look at what's happening and realize, look, I'd rather own Mexico up 56% year to date. I look at something like South Korea. I mean, that's ridiculous. What's happened in South Korea? EWY is the South Korean ETF. It's up 106% in the last year. Like, why do you want to? Okay, South Korea, 106%. S&P 500 in the last year, 13.7. What do you want to own? Brazil, 50. South Korea, 106. Gold, 80%. Silver, 200%.
Silver is just nuts to me. I mean, it was $30 an ounce last April.
Yeah. Why do you want to own the U.S. dollar? You don't want to own dollar-denominated assets. You want to own gold, silver, emerging markets, Korea, Taiwan semi, Brazil, India, emerging markets.
You ever think about leaving the United States, Mel? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just saying, like, like it's, and then the problem, like we talked about, is you have a 401k, and they give you these choices, and your choices are U.S. industrial developed, which like basically, UK, Europe, Japan, and Australia, or emerging markets. Like the best you can do is put it into emerging markets, but you don't have a choice to buy gold. You don't have a choice to buy Brazil. You don't have a choice to buy South Korea. They just don't give you that choice. And so these are the things that like people are looking at, and they're just saying, you know what, the S&P 500 is going to keep going up. It'll probably be up 10, 15% this year. But what's Korea going to be up? What's Brazil going to be up? Korea is already up year to date 13.8%. Like it's already up more than probably the S&P is going to be up the entire year in 3 weeks. Gold, what's that up? Gold year to date, 49.09 as we talk. Year to date is up 13.6, same as Korea. Silver year to date at 95.71 right now, up 32% year to date. 32% in 3 weeks. I mean, why are you investing in the S&P 500?
Do you ever think about leaving the United States, moving?
Yes, yeah, I do. But I mean, I generally think like if you just kind of carve out your own place, it doesn't really matter where it is, and it's a little easier to be in the United States and a little closer to things. But yeah, I mean, I've thought about it. My wife thinks about it more than me because, like I said, she's originally from Colombia, and so she's not born here. So she kind of thinks more like, oh, maybe go to Europe, but there's a bunch of problems there. She doesn't want to go to Asia. I'm like, well, where are you going to go? I mean, there's not really a better place. I mean, I think it's a matter of carving out your own place. Carve out your own place. Take care of your tribe. Take care of your people. Think about the world through those lenses. Don't get suckered into the liberal. Don't get suckered into the conservative narrative. Don't get suckered into CNN or Fox. They're both pushing bullshit narratives. Just, take care of yourself, the people you care about, and just look at the way the world is actually moving. And the world is moving in the direction we've been spelling out for the last hour and a half, which is it's away from the dollar, it's away from U.S. dominance, and, I think there's nothing wrong with trying to defend some of that dominance. I don't think that's anything you need to apologize for. But at the end of the day, it's a losing game. And it's like, that's just the way things are going. And, try to just soak as much in as you can. And when you look at things, like gold or the markets or different things, and you're like, oh, well, I'm investing in the S&P 500. I'm investing in the NASDAQ. I feel good about that. Like, think about that. Like, if there's a practical thing for people to do, and this isn't financial advice, it's to think about what do I have all my 401k money invested in? And say, if I have 80% of it invested in U.S. stocks, is that really where I should be invested? Because I might be up over the last year or two, but compared to Korea or silver or gold or Brazil or emerging markets, I'm not up very much at all. And so, I would just say take a look at that.
Where can people find you, Mel?
Mel Mattison 1 on X, or melmattison.com, Mattison, and I try to post out things and talk about things. One thing about me is a lot of finance or different guys that go on podcasts. They might have newsletters or Substacks or things to get subscriptions. I don't have any of that. I don't make any money from anything. I just try to share my thoughts and appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts. I do have a book called Quaz, but I'm not really here to sell that. But I just like to help people out, especially if they're looking at the world, trying to make sense of it, and thinking, how do I take what I've built and grow it? And I think one of the key ways is take a look at how much you're allocated to U.S. stocks and consider maybe you shouldn't be that much allocated.
I always enjoy our conversations, Mel, and I appreciate you coming back and look forward to continuing to follow you along. And 26 is going to be, well, here, last thing is 26. The end of 26, is it going to be? How do you see this year unfolding in terms of volatile, less volatile, crazy?
Yeah, I mean, very short term, I've been talking about this on X, is like I think they're trying to sucker everybody into the U.S. market right now. I think we went down a lot this week and we're going up. And next week, all the mega caps are reporting. Amazon, Apple, Google, they all report earnings. I think they're going to try to take it to new highs. That's going to bring a lot of people in, and then I think we're probably going to come back. So I think at the end of the year, like I said, I think the U.S. is probably going to do well overall at the end of the year. There's going to be volatility. There's going to be ups and downs. But I think that in the meantime, if you've been investing in things like Korea, Taiwan Semi, Alibaba, China, Hang Seng, FXI, KWeb, silver, gold, you're already up 30, 40% this year, and the month's not even over. So I think people really need to get in their head, like this whole thing of, oh, I'm going to own Apple and Amazon, and that's going to take care of my retirement. I think they need to think about that.
Thanks, Mel. Mic drop.